Hello and welcome to another episode of The Living Philosophy. Today's episode is about two of my favourite TV shows at the moment. So that is The Witcher and The Mandalorian. Yeah, there's something interesting that I thought about this when they were both in their first series. They both came out around the same time, and I thought that there was an interesting parallel between the two series. There's a similar archetypal pattern going on, but there's something new about it, and that's what I'd like to explore today. So, first of all, the archetype that's at work is the archetype of the divine child. And so we see this because we've got like the Baby Yoda, who's this like adorable little baby with the typical animal like big eyes. So that's a way of engendering empathy in humans. But it's this adorable thing, but it's also super powerful. We know that it's the same species as Yoda, so we know it's going to be powerful. And in the first series, it does pull out its powers a few times, and it's kick-ass. Meanwhile, in The Witcher, the representation of that divine child archetype is Ciri, who is, again, this young child, this innocent child, but who's got like a lot of spirit, she's got a lot of character, so you're immediately drawn to her in the first episode. And then as the series goes on, we see, oh wow, she's this powerful being. So she's got these powers. So like at times she screams in the first episode when they're leaving Cintra, when the Black Rider is taking her out of Cintra, and it almost opens up this like chasm in the earth. And we just see that she has these magical powers that she can't quite tap into. Same as the Baby Yoda. Like, at times they have these incredible powers, but most of the time they're these weak, helpless beings. So I find that there's an interesting parallel between the two of those. You can see the pattern of the divine child. So you might be wondering, if you're not big into Jungian psychology, what the divine child is. Well, you'll know this archetypal pattern from stories like the baby Jesus, and from the story of Moses and the reed basket, and from Harry Potter, the boy who lived. So it's this common pattern throughout mythology, and what the divine child symbolizes is the rebirth of the order of the world. So quite often in that story, you will normally have a demon power. So in the story of Jesus, you have Herod, who's going to kill all the children because he's afraid of losing his kingship to Jesus because of the prophecy. Same with the Pharaoh. He kills all the firstborn of the Hebrews because he's afraid of the Hebrews usurping power within Egypt. So he orders the killing of the firstborn, and then in Harry Potter, Voldemort gets wind of the prophecy and tries to off them. So it's that pattern of the divine child who has destiny on his side, or on her side, as we see in Ciri's case, but who have got destiny on their side, but they're also just a child, so they're also still just in this helpless state. And it's, I guess, a symbol of hope, really. It's like the purity of hope, because when you think of what a child is its innocence, its purity, it's untouched, it's uncorrupted, and that is the dream of utopia. Essentially, those are the components of the utopian dream. And so it has that innocence and fragility is tied in with that feeling of hope and with that feeling of belief in its purity. And yeah, so coupled with that is the evil order in some sense, which is Herod, which is Voldemort, which is the Pharaoh. So those are kind of the two aspects of it that you normally see. And we see that Jesus manages to survive because they get messages, and so does destiny's on their side, and that's normally the way it goes. You've got the evil but distant power, and you've got the divine child in the foreground. But what's interesting with The Witcher and with The Mandalorian is that the divine child is coupled with this other figure. And I don't know of other divine child stories where that happens. So there's a lot of similarities between The Mandalorian on the one hand and The Witcher on the other. They're both kind of lone wolves. They're quite kick-ass characters. They kick the crap out of, far more than their number. They're perceived by the rest of the people in that universe as being cold, as being killers, as being monsters, as being people just generally to be feared. So they're warriors, and there's like a foreboding shell to them, and the general assumption is that they are just cold to the core. But what we see in both of these series, the Mandalorian, rather than being professional and giving the Baby Yoda, as was the job, to the Empire and just washing his hands of it, something happens in him. Some transformation happens in him, and he says, no, wait there. I'm going to protect that child. I'm going to save that child from them, and I'm going to look after it. And in the case of the Witcher, he's again perceived as this cold thing, but he becomes entwined with Ciri, and she becomes his destiny to protect. And so there's that connection, there's that weird fatal connection, and we see that softer side of the Witcher, that caring side of the Witcher that most of the world doesn't see. They just see a mutant or a monster. And so there's this parallel thing going on in both series of the innocent, the beautiful, powerful, but helpless innocent, coupled with this almost jaded, powerful lone wolf warrior who's kind of the world is against, and is against the world. They're kind of their own entity. So we see that with the Mandalorian, who by his nature is a lone wolf, and the same with the Witcher. So even though they have their own tribe, so as we'll see in future series of the Witcher, there's I think it's Kaer Morhen is the home of the Witchers. So there are other Witchers and there are other Mandalorians, but by their nature they travel alone. They're lone wolves. So very interesting to see them both entangled with this divine child, with this symbol of hope, this symbol of some kind of salvation. That's not as clear in the case of the Mandalorian, in fairness. That's spelt out in The Witcher, but in the Mandalorian, we just have this universe where the Empire is falling apart, and it's kind of, the world is heading into decay. But at the same time, the Baby Yoda is a connection to the Jedi, which is the connection to that symbol of hope, the symbol of some kind of universal connecting power, which is the Force. So that's a very interesting thing. And what could it mean? So as I said, I haven't really seen this pattern occur together before. You normally have the divine child and destiny just protects them, and it just kind of works out. We kind of don't hear about Jesus or Moses in their childhoods, or Harry Potter really. He ends up with his family, with his aunt and her family, it's not a nurturing environment. But it's not that cold warrior. So it's a very different setup. So it's interesting. You don't see it in Peter Pan. You don't see it in Narnia with the Pevensie siblings. So it's not a common thing. So what could it be? And I've been thinking about this a bit. Because these symbols, they almost don't occur accidentally. To my mind anyway, I think of something that Jung said. So after the First World War, between the First World War and the Second World War, Jung recorded this emergence of this symbol in the German psyche. So in all his analyses, he noticed the emergence of what he called the blonde beast, this archetype that he seemed to thought had awakened within the consciousness of Germanic people. And he connected it with the ancient god Wotan. And it's just an archetypal energy, an energy from the collective unconscious that is shared by that culture and that led to the Nazis. Because that energy wasn't recognized, because we don't really have a language around archetypal energies in the modern world. But if you look at what happened, Germany and Japan are great examples of this kind of a pattern. So you look at Germany, even when the Nazis are defeated, post-war, the German economy, it's like that energy was still there. We could still call it that Wotan energy was still working. And Germany rebuilt itself with this incredible vigor. And economists who aren't necessarily ones to go towards hyperbole, but they describe it as the German economic miracle. And a similar thing happened in Japan. Again, they were defeated in World War II. Again, they had that imperial masculine energy. and that also got defeated, and it's like the energy got canalized. It got the canal within the psyche moved it from the war, where it reached a blockage of, okay, you've been defeated, and channeled into economy. And you look at what happened to the Japanese economy after World War II, a similar sort of economic miracle. So this is what I'm thinking of when I connect the Baby Yoda and the Ciri patterns together. I'm thinking of them as being part of a cultural context in which an archetype has awoken, in which something has awoken in the culture, because obviously The Witcher hasn't drawn from the Mandalorian and the Mandalorian hasn't drawn from The Witcher. They're completely different genres. But the fact that I think that they've gripped the public consciousness, because they're two of the most popular shows, as far as I know, but they're two very popular shows, and they tap into a similar thing of it's like a mirror of that archetype. And so for me, it speaks to something that is happening, stirring in the culture. And so what could that be? So we are in a state of some kind of loss at the moment. There's a loss of values. There's a loss of me. We're a bit lost as a culture, and we're becoming more polarized. We're becoming more torn apart. And you could see the calls of, or the denunciation of toxic masculinity, and the general insult and degradation of masculinity in general. It's not the popular gender to be at the moment. But that denigration of masculinity could maybe be represented in the symbol of the jaded old warrior. Maybe not. I'm just thinking here. But you could connect that to the masculine energy of The Witcher or of the Mandalorian. That it seems like this cold, heartless kind of a killer on the outside. It's got a harsh exterior, but that on the inside there is a spark of something soft that's still there. Something heartful and compassionate that's still alive in that heart, and becomes entangled with this divine child symbol. So with the birth of something new. So it could be just even if we separate the masculinity, okay, let's connect it to the masculinity of culture in general, the patriarchy, as many people call it. And the masculine structure of society, which seems heartless and seems to get a universally bad name, but on the other hand, it has led to a lot of progress. It's led to the world that we live in, and perhaps the fruit of the patriarchy is its own death, is its own dismantling. So if the West has been built up by patriarchy, its fruit is feminism. Its fruit is all the rights and freedoms that we're seeing, perhaps. Okay, so if we read it as that, a masculine society, a seemingly heartless, cold killer of a society, which would seem to match over onto our image of the patriarchy. Okay, let's dig into that then. What is the thing that it seems like a positive symbol is being born here with the Baby Yoda, with the Ciri image? And interesting again, you got The Witcher, old masculine cold lone wolf, and Ciri, this innocent little girl, but she's the one with the power. She's the one that will transform the world. And so in both cases, this innocent, which is different to the masculine cold energy. It's got that feminine receptivity, but a deeper power almost, a more intuitive, destined power. And so it seems like a positive symbol for me that something is stirring in the collective consciousness, or the collective unconsciousness, that is pointing towards a development of our consciousness, towards a development of something that we can hope for, something that we can actually believe in. And how this will manifest, I have no idea. Will it even manifest, or is this just the musings of a madman? I'm not sure, but I do see a connection between them, and it seems like a similar myth to the divine child of Jesus, the divine child of Moses, who came at times when there needed to be a revolution. So I'm wondering if this is the story, and obviously we live in a time without much mythology. So can mythology even develop now? But looking at our Hollywood, at our TV, at how this myth is generating here, it seems to point to a symbol of hope, if this is what is bubbling up in the unconsciousness. So I just thought that that would be an interesting thing to share. It's something I've been thinking about since the last series, and I'm curious to see how it would develop in future series. But for now, that would be, that's just a thought that I feel like should be out there, because it's really fascinating for me, and I wonder if there's something going on a deeper level within culture that reflects this. If you like this video, please subscribe, give that thumbs up, a like, and I'd love to hear from you. Give me a comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you again in the next video. Thanks for watching.